You are listening to Latinx America, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade.
Thanks for joining us again this week. I am excited to share that over the next 9 weeks, we will be publishing a series of stories that I captured at the first Kapor Center Latinx and Tech event in Oakland. This is the first time that I actually record at an event, so I have to warn you that you will hear a little bit of background noise like salsa playing in the background and people laughing, which I really hope entices you to attend next year's event. Our guest today is Lili Gangas. She is the Chief Technology Community Officer at the Kapor Center. In this role, Lili helps catalyze Oakland's emergence as a social impact hub of tech done right. She advises inclusive tech entrepreneurship ecosystem building activities and Oakland initiatives such as Oakland Startup Network, TechHire Oakland, and Kapor Center Innovation Lab, just to name a few. Before coming to the Kapor Center, Lili was an associate principal at Accenture Technology Lab's Open Innovation team based out of Silicon Valley, building bridges between startups and commercial clients. She was also a founding member of the Innovation Services team at Booz Allen, specializing in crowdsourcing, price challenges, and open data solutions at the federal level. Before that, Lili could be found in the lab working on software and hardware solutions for aerospace industry as a senior multidisciplined software engineer at Raytheon Space and Airborne Systems. She was also a 2018 New America California Fellow. Lili, it's a pleasure to have you join us at Latinx America, especially because this is a big event for you. We are at the Kapor Center's Latinx and Tech event in Oakland, and we have, how many people do we have here?
We have over 250 people. We're aiming for 200, and we ended up selling out. And I think with everybody, volunteers and staff together, easily we were probably at 300, which is amazing for being the inaugural event of this type for the community. It just validates the demand. And so we're just super excited that it's been so well received.
And I hear that it was something that was a vision of you, Carolina, and Josh, and you pulled it off, and kudos to you, and primarily because it's needed and it's very important for our community. But Lili, you have like a wonderful story, because I've heard it before, but our listeners have not heard it. So why don't we start with your personal journey into tech and like the tech space, and now as a big advocate through the Kapor Center.
Sure. So my journey with tech starts with my immigration story. So I immigrated from Bolivia when I was 6.5, 7 years old. Moved to California, grew up in Southern California, Chatsworth, Northridge, the San Fernando Valley, where the Karate Kid grew up. That's how I would have to tell people that, like, I'm from Reseda. And then they were like, all right, now I know where you're at. But it's a really telling story, because I think, especially leaving Bolivia, where a lot of the engineers is what is very common. Everybody's an engineer because you need it. And so it's always been something that I think, even in Bolivia, the engineers, the lawyers, doctors, it's something that we saw more of in our families and just throughout the community. And so moving here to the U.S., my mom had that type of vision already, and being able to have that support of somebody like my mother to be able to be like, you're going to do this and then some, I think it's really at the heart of where I am today and why I am the person I am. And so when I was in second grade, when I started, I remember very clearly my second grade teacher telling my mom that, like, oh, she has something here. And it was just, I think, my love for math, and because I couldn't speak English, right? And so I think that math was the universal language. And that's the way I communicated, at least for the first few months. But I remember that second grade, he would always like make us paint and read. And I just learned English by playing with the rest of the kids. But it was really important, because that's the time where now I understand how important it was to be, in a way, identified as like, oh, they're good at math. Because what you don't realize is that you start placing kids in certain boxes as early as elementary and junior high school, specifically for math and science. A lot of the teachers, that's where they start tracking students. They're like, oh, this one's going to go into honors, or this one's going to go into here. And I think and I saw that change and that difference between how my sister was treated, who came in middle school. My sister was way more advanced in math, but because she didn't speak English, they put her in ESL. And then naturally, what we started to see were the systematic issues. Oh, if you're ESL, that means that you're not good at math. That means that you aren't understand science, which is wrong. And so my mom was able to really see the contrast between how they were treating her and how they were treating me. And so she just took it on her own hands, despite 2 jobs, go out into our school and be like, nope, you're going to put my daughters into the classes. If not, they're going to skip the grade. So it was a very, very telling of that. And I think that that's something that I have kept in mind, especially in the work that I do, of how so early on, if you don't have somebody really championing you or somebody really helping you grow and stretch you, it'll make the difference. Because I saw a lot of my friends that I met in elementary and how our paths ended up being so different in high school and post-high school and college. And I realized, I was like, wow, it was actually started in elementary. And it started in middle school, where you start really getting those opportunities and people discard other people. And that's just unfortunate. And I think that for me, that's been something that I've carried along. And specifically that, and seeing where they were going, and my mom's always challenging me to keep doing better and keep learning. And my gravity towards math and science is what helped me get into engineering. Eventually, I went to a magnet high school, which is, again, the whole tracking. And
Tracking worked for me as well, though. It's a bad thing, but in some cases, like
I got fortunate.
I got fortunate too. I was like an ELL student too. Mr. Wishick identified me in 6th grade. I love math just like you, except once I got to middle school and high school, I didn't go into math. So it was just really interesting. So you went to a magnet school?
And I remember clearly as well, it was my 3rd year in high school. A young Latina woman who was a civil engineer came in and was talking about, this is what engineering is. And we had a book, and I remember reading the book, and I was like, wait, I don't like this. I don't like mechanical. I don't like this. Let me keep reading. And I ended up finding electrical engineering, because you get to work with circuits and radios and all these electronics that I was like, ooh, this is fun. This looks cool. And that's how I actually ended up choosing my college major, because I was like, oh, this seems really interesting. Little did I know that electrical engineering was the most competitive and the hardest major to apply to any school. And I did it, and I eventually, fast forward, I got a full ride at USC to be able to do that. I was a proud Trojan. I was able to persevere, and it wasn't easy. It was definitely hard. But I think that there was a lot of early community groups that I think that helped me get where I am today, that I still look to as the work that I currently do. So, for example, I was very involved in Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. That's where I saw my community of like brown people, Latinx people coming together and really supporting each other. And I didn't really understand how hard and how underrepresented we were when I would leave that group. And I think because the USC's engineering school, at that time, it wasn't that big. So I still felt represented. But as soon as I left that group, I can see the drastic difference. But fast forward, I had I remember I had this moment where in sophomore year, I went to go ask for help. And I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I did a summer bridge program where they train us to be like, you sit at the front row, you ask for help, you stay on top of it. And I was doing what I was told, what I was trained. And I go ask my professor for help, and then he's like, oh, this is too hard for you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I came to ask for help. That's what office hours are for. He's like, no, you should do underwater basket weaving. And I was like, what the heck is that? And I paused, because I'm like, I don't get that joke. Mm-hmm. I was like, it just went over my head. I'm like, that was weird. And I kind of just shoved it off. And I told my mom, and my mom was like, who is this professor? Like, that's wrong. But she also held back. And fast forward, when I finally graduated, proud, my mom's there. She tells me after I graduated that really hurt her. And because somebody was trying to diminish my value. Mm-hmm. And I remember that my mom didn't want me to feel any type of hesitation, because I was already like, oh my God, is this for me? Should I do this? But she's like, did you work hard enough? Like, could you have done better? I was like, oh, yeah, I think so. Did you really like put in your all? I was like, I think I could do better. So she told me to do it. And I think that's a turning moment where I was like, we're going to finish this. I'm not going to be the statistic that people continue to talk about, despite having somebody who's supposed to be in that position to help you. And so I surpassed it, but it was afterwards that my mom actually shared how hurtful it was to her. But she was helping me stay strong. And then these are just like minor stories, right? Those are like little paper cuts that now that I do the work that I'm in at the Kapor Center of trying to diversify tech and entrepreneurship, these are those paper cuts that sometimes you carry along that maybe before you didn't realize they were cutting you. And so it's been an interesting aspect of taking that. And I think for me, finally getting into like an engineering job to apply it, I think was a turning moment for me of being able to say, we're going to do this and we're going to succeed in it. And I never looked back to some degree in that sense because I was able to get past it. I was fortunate to get a really great job at Raytheon Space and Urban Systems, going into aerospace engineering.
You're an aerospace engineer.
Yes, I was. What was great about that area was I was part of the software engineering center, which brought in electrical engineers like myself, but brought in math, brought in physics, it brought in computer science and folks together to think about how to solve and build systems, like huge aircraft systems. And it was overwhelming in the beginning. I'm like, what is my place here? I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like from Bolivia and like touching all this classified information. This seems like crazy. But it was also very humbling, but at the same time it was empowering because I'm like, people have no clue what I'm working on, the stuff that I'm seeing. And even to this day, I think I was able to get access and see the future. I was able to look at some of the technologies that now we take for granted, but a lot of our innovations that we use on our phones, for example, came from military and came from this type of space where back in the day, our government used to put a lot of money into research and development, into exploring areas that nobody would explore, but now it gets commercialized. And that's the stuff that's driving a lot of technology we use. So I think I was very fortunate to be able to see that directly hands-on and build it and sometimes break it. But I think that lived journey of going from just being a kid who just, I just like math and that was the way I communicated to turning it into a career and then being able to have that journey inform the work that I do because I know what it's like. My strategy and the way I approach problems is not theoretical, but it's from lived experience. But I also understand how fast technology moves because when I was at Raytheon, the software that I was building was also going to displace me. And I remember working on really low-level board-to-board, like hardware meets software, like at the more granular level than people would care about. But fast forward, it was like writing code and like trying to make all this stuff work together. And like within my time at Raytheon, Microsoft came up with an automated way to do this, and I was like, whoa. That's what it feels like to start getting displaced. That's the same urgency that I see now with the work that I do, which is why I continue to look forward of where emerging technology is going. We need our community to really step in, to learn about it more directly. And I think that's a passion for me that I have for the work that I do.
So what is the emerging technology that you see, especially for Latinos listening, that we should really be focusing on?
It's all about data science. It's the application. Ultimately, it's really artificial intelligence and all these automation that's coming up that we already are seeing. One of the things that today specifically, on day 2 here for the LTX Summit, we wanted to focus on those things. We wanted to raise urgency because a lot of the technology, especially just from a pure tech design of product and all that good stuff, if you don't have the right use cases, if you're not looking for the right problems or the right boundary, or you don't even think of certain use cases, your technology, your product's gonna suck. It doesn't matter if you have the most talented people, but if they're not looking for certain scenarios, then you're really hampering technology. And I think with things like artificial intelligence, we're also starting to get into the ethical discussion. We're also starting to get into what are the unintended consequences of what is it that we're building. And so I think technology now, it's really, especially some of these emerging technologies like AI, it's not about technologists anymore. what we really need are folks who are designers, people who understand how it would impact humans on an everyday and how it would impact different communities. And so that's a part that I'm passionate about, being able to just democratize access to these fields that I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley make it sound harder than what it really is.
How does one prepare for that in terms of like design? Do you recommend like certain schooling? Do you recommend certain resources that people should tap?
Right now, if you have Wi-Fi, you have a phone, there's so much information available. When actually I started working at Accenture, so after I left Raytheon, because I didn't want to work in that systems anymore. I wanted to work in things that were applying technology for different uses. I actually went to business school where I got trained myself on like finance, on strategy, on marketing, things that I hadn't gotten exposed to before. And so I think folks need to continuously level up and continuously look for opportunities. My mom cried when I left to go to grad school. Because she, not for like she was crying like, you're gonna get debt. Why are you leaving a good job? Like, this doesn't make sense. And I told her, I'm like, Mom, this is why there's not that many Latinas in grad school in general. This is why there's not enough Latinas in top MBA programs in general. This is why we're also not being able to build more leaders. And I think that innate condition of continuously learning in non-traditional forms are important, and as well as traditional forms. I think if there's anything, there's just so much information available that we just need to find a way to tap into our interest. But there is, specifically to answer your question more about like where do folks go and learn more about design, coming to things like this. There's a lot of knowledge and really cutting edge thinking that's not shared or published. It's shared through these types of conferences.
I think because things are changing so fast sometimes, especially like with community focused information, like especially for diverse folks. We just had the speaker that you just had, Nancy, who spoke about how technology is impacted by different perspectives, right? By worldviews. Things are moving so fast that, like, even we were talking to her earlier, she hasn't even been able to put it on paper. Like everything, she's got so many things going on. So it makes sense that gatherings and or convenings, even if they're meetups that are local, national, can make a big difference.
Definitely, and I think one of the things that I would like our community to do more of is publish more, share more, write more. I joined New America. I'm a New America California Fellow to specifically going on the theme of continuous learning. How can I improve my writing? How can I improve my storytelling? And that's one of the things that also somebody from being a technical background, you don't really get trained. You just kind of get put into these situations, and so. How do we look at our gaps and our strengths and continuously find different ways? Because I think now the opportunities is that folks they learn in different manners and they learn with different content. I'm much more of a visual person. And when I was at Accenture specifically, I remember being in the Accenture tech team, technology labs, I think it was called. They were like, go learn about emerging tech. Where should we be putting our money? They just threw me in. And actually, I found Twitter as a great place to get started because people now, the folks who are the ones, the technologists, the ones that are publishing, they actually publish first to Twitter. You're actually getting first sources directly from there. And so I created a list of, all right, we're going to learn about VC, who are the investors. Created a list, started following them. To learn about product, which ones are the best products, created a list for that. Who are the influencers, created a list for that. And so then that way, whenever I log in, I've curated the type of content that I want to get exposed to in a way that I can continuously learn. And so there's a few hacks, things like that. There's also boot camps, there's also design schools, product schools, things like that. But specifically for intersectional and inclusive design, it's going to be our people learn by doing.
Experiential.
Totally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What other pieces of advice do you have for the members that are, or the listeners that are thinking about transitioning into tech, that feel that they might not belong or they might not have the skill set necessary to either apply to a company or maybe launch their own venture?
Yeah, well, I think it's a mix of things. If I can think out loud, and I'm sure you'll edit this.
Yes, you're allowed to do
I'm just thinking out loud. I think my journey, when people ask me like, how'd you get here? Oh, wow, what your job is so interesting. And like, what is this? I'm like, it's a 7 to 10 year journey. It really started with me being in the weeds and like building things that like, people were like, what the hell is this? Of like legit being like circuitry, being in the lab, building, learning about different areas that even now I'm like, I don't know how I understood that. But I think it's, at least for me, it's been a continuous learning path. And I've made a lot of pivots. So I actually started my career in technology, being on the ground, getting into management, and then being able to figure out, is this what I want or not? Because I was at Raytheon at a path that I had to choose, do you stay technical for a while or do you go into management? But what I realized there is that there was a lot of bias, that if you leave the product, you're no longer, that you're seen as like the technical person. There was always that tension. But I decided, you know what, I want to pursue my own investment in my own growth. Despite what my mom said, despite what some other folks said, I left grad school. I made that jump. I took that risk to go and invest in myself. So that's number one. You got to take the risk and invest in yourself, and not feel that you gotta do the cookie cutter part. We're not in times where that works anymore. So I did that, and even then I was very humbled. I actually found business school because it was so much more competitive in a way that I hadn't been exposed to than engineering. I actually found it harder because of how to deal with the politics of people, the different skills and how they show up to places. I was recruiting for a management consulting, and that's where I actually saw even more bias than even sometimes in the lab when I was at Raytheon, where how tall were you? How light-skinned are you? Who made your suit? And things like that. I was like, wait, is this an environment I want to go into? I actually wanted to just apply to social entrepreneurship. And so I made a whole pivot. I eventually ended up in management consulting, but working with startups and Fortune 500s or government clients. But I found this path where I just went from tech to business to strategy, and eventually found my way back again by tech. And I think this was a forced function of the reality that we're in. Most of the growth globally is coming from technology. And so whether people like it or not, we have to have our space there. Because if you're not on the boat of where the growth is coming, you're going to be left behind. And we have to tell specifically our community to lean into that, to level up into that and own it. Because otherwise, we're not in it now, especially with some of these emerging technologies like the AIs, the blockchains, all these things, right? There's new infrastructure being created. And if we're not there from the beginning, we're going to miss out on the wave again. And so I think that it's one of those things that you got to continuously learn, take the risks, invest in yourself. You will be that crazy person that it's like, why are you doing this? And that's okay. You're going to forge the ground. And I think there's also those things that people say like, to be it, you need to see it. That's true. But we also, if you don't have that, you got to build it. We have to build it, and we have to not be afraid to do that and trust that our lived journeys are unique and powerful, but we have to apply it and try it.
And then know that there are people like you, like Josh, like the 250 people that are outside of this room that are there. So even though we don't quite have the numbers yet, our community is here to stay, and it's up to us to make it grow, right?
Yeah, to make it grow. And I also think is that meeting the community where they're at. I think that that's been one of the biggest lessons in doing this type of work, especially with community engagement, is I can tell them like, hey, look at all this amazing technology, but if it doesn't resonate into their why, or also just looking at the realities, just here in Oakland, the cost of living has increased significantly. people are just trying to make ends meet. And so this investment of them in oneself seems a very far-fetched type of goal when we talk about like what's really happening in life, right? From an everyday. But I think those are the opportunities where you got to do it. And I just look back at my mom. No, like single mom, 2 kids. She was like, I think younger than me. She was like 25 when she came to the US with 2 kids, 2 jobs, learned English, picked up like Farsi and some other languages while working. And she still went to education. She still became and continued to take on, she went into like medical assisting, for example. She gets certified and then she pivoted her career. And so I had that role model where start wherever you're at now, but move forward. And every little by little, continuously learn, find a way to upskill yourself. So I do the same thing for me now. And I think that our community needs to step into their worth and their power. And I guess just thinking out loud, one of the things that I would like also for folks to think about, and maybe even some of the younger folks, is that sometimes we feel the pressure that we have to take our entire families along with us. I think there's times to be selfish. There's times where you just need to take care of you while you're trying to figure it out to get that education. Seeing my mom cry when I left to New York for where I'm investing in myself, I had to make a sacrifice. I left the West Coast, moved to the East Coast for about 5-6 years. I left everything, but you have to take it. And that was my time to be selfish. That was my time to invest in myself. And I think sometimes our communities feel so that need to take everybody, that sometimes you're not able to progress or be the person that gets a little bit farther. And sometimes those people that get left behind get hurt because it's like, you left me. You didn't like, I see some of like, cousins and things like that. But you have to take it. You'll come back and you'll help them, but somebody needs to continue to move forward. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay if you are always coming back in a way that you're paying it forward. It's kind of those sacrifices that sometimes it's hard to talk about. But that's how some of the folks, sometimes you just have to do it. And so my advice would be for somebody that's in between that transition, instead of going to let's say your local school and you get a much better deal at another school, or you want to just get a different environment, go for it. You won't regret it, just go for it. And the folks who aren't sure they'll miss that person, support them, as opposed to like forcing them to stay back or feeling guilty about leaving. Because you want people to spread their wings as much as they can while the opportunity's there. Sometimes it doesn't come back. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. And so for me, I always have that open mentality of like, what if? And like, why not? So it's like, why not? Why not me? Why not take it? And you'll never know what opportunities end up coming your way. And I guess to close it up, that's how that 7 to 10 journey of my life came in. Going from engineering to like whatever management consulting that was a hybrid of business and design strategy, to then community builder, but still strategist. I still use all the different skills, everything that I've been able to have in my journey for whatever reason. I think subconsciously I've always connected the dots and have helped me where I am today. And so take the opportunity because you don't know where it's going to take you.
What's your next play with Kapor Center and some of the work that you guys are doing? You have a lot of enthusiasm out there right now. How do you capitalize on that?
Continue to connect the dots between the communities. I think one of the issues that I see specifically in the Latinx community in the US is fragmentation. We don't support each other enough. We criticize each other too much. We have to learn how to give each other better feedback and take the feedback. I think that's the part. How can we have honest discussions that are coming from a place of growth where we're actually trying to help each other? And I think with the work that we're doing at the Kapor Center, especially going into 2019, we're gonna start connecting the dots more. There's a specific initiative that's gonna be coming out where we're gonna be looking and trying to learn from other cities, as well as those cities learn from us, in a way that is focused around communities of color in tech that hasn't been done before. And we're gonna put money towards it. Not just us, but other organizations. I think it's an opportunity where we need to be asking the why not? Why are we investing more? And not just going after those $100,000 grants that some organizations do, which are good amounts, but we should be talking in the millions. We got to think bigger. We got to think bigger, bolder, and with the right data points to always back that type of strategy up. I think we'll do it. And so for us in 2019, at least community engagement perspective of what happens after this, right? So what if we had this event? Mm-hmm. After this, there's about 30 to 40% of the attendees here are not from the Bay Area or from California. So the goal is to connect them to their local resources. The startup weekends that we did in those 10 cities, they weren't coincidental. Mm-hmm. We're continuing to build upon them because sometimes some of the groups in those cities were the first time that they actually worked together. And so we want them to leave today with knowing what other organizations are around them, so then that way they can work together, both on the ground, but also sharing the knowledge, sharing their stories. And so that's why doing these types of podcasts are important, because it starts with stories, and it starts with each person. So then that way they can inspire the next person, and that's where the innovations of like, oh, what if, why not, type of thing. So we hope that we'll continue to work doing the work here in Oakland in the East Bay. That's our priority to show. This is our community. But we want to connect the dots with other ecosystems, other cities as well that are in the same place or maybe are further or maybe younger in their journey of focusing in this type of work.
Well, thank you, Lili, not only for sharing your story, but also you, Josh, Kim, and I met. You hosted a dinner not too long ago for media, and you were kind enough to invite me. And I think we talked about me being here and capturing stories, and we made it happen. So thanks for the invitation. Thanks for sharing your story and for inspiring others and for the work that you continue to do as a champion for our community.
No, thank you. This comes from the heart, and it's really for the people. It's not about me or Kapor Center. It's really about the community. So thank you.
Same here. This comes from the heart, and it's for the community. So thank you, and we will be in touch soon.
Great. Thanks.
I hope that you were able to feel like you were at the event. There was so much positive energy in that room. So I hope that you will join us at the Latinx and Tech event next year. Now, let's move on to the tech term of the episode, and we will also add a little bit of a twist to our tech terms of the episode. Lili mentioned the importance of emerging technologies, and she specifically mentioned AI. Well, I did some research, and I also found a list of other emerging technologies, which this list was published by the World Economic Center. And I'm going to define one emerging technology during each of the next 10 episodes. According to an article published by Oliver Kahn after the World Economic Forum's annual meeting of the new champions, emerging technologies are breakthrough technologies that are likely to shape our lives in the near future, disrupt practices, or shake up industries. And we're seeing that with transportation, with Lyft and Airbnb, on housing, and also other technologies that are just really changing the way things have traditionally been done. So the full list of these emerging technologies can be found on weforum.org. And I have to say that this list that they put out there was curated by a panel of scientists and experts. So it was just not a single person coming up with this list. And today we will focus on describing augmented reality, which was the first emerging technology listed. And it is defined by realitytechnologies.com as an enhanced version of reality where we live direct or indirect views of physical real-world environments. And these environments are augmented with superimposed computer-generated images over a user's view of the world, thus enhancing one's current perception of reality. And the World Economic Panel of scientists suggested that some of the future use will be to, for example, help surgeons visualize tissues beneath a patient's skin in 3 dimensions, or conjure up holographic-like guides to take you through a museum. There are some really good demo videos which you can find on YouTube if you Google augmented reality. And I'm actually going to put a link to this article that has the full list of emerging technologies and a demo video on the note pages of the podcast. So we hope this information is useful to you. We really want you to be ready for, interested in, and engaged as a creator with some of these emerging technologies. And last but not least, please don't forget to rate us on whatever platform you use to listen our podcast and send feedback. We're always open and interested in feedback from you.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Latinx America and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.